I'm happy to welcome Aaron Hayes to the program today. He's an energetic entrepreneur and creative, and he's truly living faith and culture out on a limb. Hi, Aaron. Well,
Hi, Cheryl.
welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. This is really fun and exciting.
Aaron, we've known each other for about 10 years now, and I remember that we met shortly after we moved to Reading, and at that time, you were a teacher here in
Yeah.
Reading. What was going on then?
Yeah. At the time, I was working in our local high school system here, the Shasta Union High School District. And I was a teacher at an alt ed school. So this was a school for kids who were behind in credits, behind in grades. Maybe they had gotten into some trouble because of fighting or drugs. So it was a school for at risk youth. And I absolutely loved it. I thought that I would never leave it. I got my master's degree in education and planned on being the next principal at that school, but God moved me on in an unexpected way. So I ended up becoming a pastor after that.
Right. So you transitioned into youth pastoring, and you did that for a while, and
Yeah.
and you were great at it. And your wife Sarah was involved as well. I remember that. So take us on the journey from there, because that's when things start getting really wild for you.
I shifted from teaching into pastoring. I got laid off in the state budget crisis, and then proceeded to jump into this church that I had helped start called The Stirring, which was an amazing experience. And I had when I was working as a teacher, I had started a mentoring program in partnership with the church to bring mentors onto the school campus because we saw so many hurting kids that were just absolutely struggling. And the difference between one kid graduating versus another kid failing would be a positive, significant adult relationship. So basically, as I was youth pastoring, my heart was always for those at risk kids, the youth of our city who were hurting and didn't have someone. And so I had started a mentoring program um, with the church called Catalyst Mentoring, with the mission to basically recruit and train mentors for hurting youth in our city. And that ended up growing and growing and growing. And so eventually it led me to a place where I had made a decision that I needed to do and build this mentoring nonprofit full time. So I stepped out of the responsibilities in the church and I launched this nonprofit and we began to train mentors. So we trained about 450 mentors. And the journey of building a nonprofit is, if you've ever built something like this before, you know it is very difficult. It's very challenging. And on top of building all of that, shortly after I had stepped out, we had local wildfires roll through our area, and it devastated a lot of people, a lot of their homes. And our most of our primary donors came out of one particular side of the town, Reading, and so that really affected our nonprofit, which relied on donations to do our work. And so we lost probably half of our donors in that fire because a lot of our donors came from the area that had burned down. So people were, pulling their funds because they needed to take care of their families, or if they hadn't lost their homes, their friends had. And so they were giving to some of the bigger nonprofits for fire recovery. So
Mhm.
that put us in a really unique position where very shortly after leaving the security of a paycheck to build a nonprofit, I was out on my own, and we'd lost half our income, if not more, and wondering what in the world was God doing with me.
I'm
Yeah.
sure. I'm sure. Yeah. And then it wasn't long after that that we ended up with all the changes with COVID.
Right. And so with the fires, we barely survived as a nonprofit. And so we had, I was really out on this faith walk with the Lord of, Lord, I thought you called me to this. And if you called me to this, I'm confused why the provision is going away. And so I remember that one of my friends who's a pastor, he used to say vision or provision follows vision. And I was like, well, this vision is yours, Lord. So where's the provision? And so because we'd lost a lot of our donors, I had to decide whether or not I was going to lay off the team um, at Catalyst mentoring, or if I was going to take a paycheck myself, because the work still needed to be done. Just because the fires happened didn't mean kids stopped needing mentors. If anything, they needed more mentors because they were traumatized and they were hurting and the teachers were exhausted. And so we decided to keep the organization moving forward. And so I had gone about 5 months without a paycheck, and that's less about me. It's more about the faith journey. But I was in my truck driving home one night, and I was just really frustrated. Because I was at my breaking point. I was like, I can't go another month with no income. And but I think the Lord was using all of that tension to really help draw some things out that were in my heart, like hidden dreams, hidden passions that I had thought about maybe in the secret place by myself, but I hadn't really talked with anyone about and
Mhm.
hadn't given myself permission to entertain them any farther. And now at this point, I was entertaining everything. If you go 5 months without a paycheck, and I wasn't on unemployment, I wasn't, there was no other resource coming in. And so I was entertaining everything. And so the Lord began to speak to me in my truck, and I felt at that moment it was like, Aaron, how are you going to, because one of my dreams has been to be a consultant, to do consulting and work with leaders and develop leaders. And I always felt like, hey, I'm really good. Just throw me into a mess and let me help you solve your problem. And I loved that. And so in this moment, I was in my own mess, and the Lord began to speak to me. And he just said, Aaron, how can you coach and how can you consult and teach other leaders if you've never had to be out on a limb for something you believe in?
Wow,
And
that's,
so
that's such a key revelation, isn't it?
oh man, I remember in the moment going, "Whoa!" I This was the moment. I mean, it's like he almost led me down a path to this place where I finally was not in my own strength. If you know me, I'm pretty stubborn, and if you know me, I'm pretty strong-willed to the point where like I can go a really long time and I don't need the affirmation that God's there or that he's for me. I'm like, no, of course he's for me. But it took me 5 months without a paycheck to finally start getting to the place where I went, wait, are you for me? And I felt like the Lord's like, I'm for you on a greater level than you know, but you needed to be out far enough where you could recognize that I am actually in it for you. And
Mm.
so that was a powerful moment for me. And shortly thereafter, new funding came through, and we were able to get everything going again. And then we made it a year. We shifted all of our programs, and I hired a few different people, and we started doing school-based mentoring programs, which was wonderful. We were serving about 150 kids on 5 campuses, um, and still training new mentors. And then COVID hit, and so we got less than 24 hours notice before we were booted off all of our campuses, and then we had to re-envision again.
Mhm, mhm. So what is Catalyst looking like right now, given
Yeah.
the current state of things?
Yeah, so when COVID first hit, of course, we had a long, drawn out summer where we were actually set with all of the grant writing and the fundraising that we had done. We were about to have our biggest year ever, which was very exciting. We had everything lined up, and we were going to be expanding and growing our services in the community. Now, before COVID had hit, I was already feeling in my heart that I was supposed to hand off Catalyst soon.
Mm,
So
okay.
pre-COVID, this wasn't initiated by COVID, but um, I was already feeling that. And so I had been developing one of the leaders on the team to replace me, which of course, when you're in, church ministry, that's supposed to be your goal. We make disciples, and we make disciples who make disciples. And so your job's to work yourself out of a job. And so
Exactly. Yeah.
I was feeling at this point, because I had been doing Catalyst for about 5 years, part of it through the church and then part of it on my own, that I was like, I should have duplicated myself by now. What is happening? And so I really got intentional at this point about duplicating myself. Well, then COVID hit, and of course, um, uh, I would say 90% of our funding dried up. A lot of the grants that we were going after hit pause, like a permanent pause, because everybody held on to what they had because no one knew what was going to happen.
Mm.
So in that moment of a freeze, Catalyst again was in a compromised position where we had no funds coming in from an unexpected outside, not of our making problem. And all of the nonprofits, honestly, in our region, probably outside of our region, were really struggling to survive, because it came down to, when you can't meet in person, how do you do your mission, right? And when it comes to Zoom and being on a screen, you cannot mentor kids the same way you can when you're shoulder to shoulder with them.
Mhm.
And so we were really struggling at that point to pivot. What are we going to do here? Meanwhile, because of our funding had dried up, we knew that we could make it, um, probably about 6 months or so. We knew we could make it about 6 months with no income coming in, and fundraising was difficult. And so we kept our staff on, and we were trying to find some ways to pivot, and they weren't very successful. Of course, just like everyone, we kind of believed at the beginning of, hey, if we social distance in a month or two, we're going to be able to get back together. And so we're kind of holding out for that, but it never quite came together, of course. And so with us struggling, we had to make a harder pivot, which was we had to figure out how we're going to move forward. And so meanwhile, money's not coming in, and money wasn't coming in. And I already knew that I was supposed to transition. And so I was wondering at this point, like, Lord, am I supposed to like let Catalyst die? Because we had literally come down to the point where we were at our last, basically, we had enough to pay everyone, and then I had to lay everyone off, and then I had one paycheck left.
Wow.
And so I had told the Catalyst board, I said, guys, I think this is it. And if you know me, Cheryl, I mean, I'm pretty connected in the community. I know a lot of people. I know a lot of resources. I know a lot of funding. I had worked every angle that I knew to work to keep Catalyst alive, and I couldn't find a way. And so I had told the board, I said, you guys, I think this is it. At minimum, we're having to freeze. We're going to have to put Catalyst on a freeze, because there's literally no money left. And I have to find a way to take care of my family. And at this point, I'd laid off everyone. And so the board began to pray. Of course, I was praying. We were all praying, but the board pushed back really hard. It just said, no, we can't close down Catalyst. There's, God's on this. There's too many good things happening. And we need to find a way through. And I said, well, I don't know how to find a way through at this point. I've exhausted every resource that I know of, and I'm a pretty resourceful guy. So I had kind of been grieving that. Meanwhile, I had received a couple of phone calls, and I said, look, we're going to meet in 2 weeks, and I think we're going to go ahead and put Catalyst to bed. And so in between that call and then the next board meeting, which was going to be in 2 weeks, I had $150,000 in unexpected funds come through. Of They were the longest of long shots in my mind. They were such long shots that I didn't spend very much time with them, because it just, and then when COVID hit, I'm like, there's no way that those funds are still available. Even though I had talked with them and it had seemed like they were in fact not available, somehow they all came through. So I had just told the board that, hey, we're going to have to shut this thing down. And then we meet in 2 weeks and I said, guys, um, we have $150,000 coming into the bank within the next 4 weeks. And so we were just on this wild roller coaster. But at the same time, I told the board, I said, I need you guys to know something. Prior to this, I felt like the Lord was calling me to step out of the executive director role. I'm happy to be on the board, but it's time for me to hand it off. And so we proceeded to take the next steps with this leader that I had been developing. And so I handed off Catalyst this last October.
Mm-hmm.
And her name's Jenna. She's been wonderful. And so Jenna started to run with Catalyst. We have a new little our mentoring office. And so we mentor kids in small groups. And we're mentoring, I think right now we're mentoring about 40 kids. And we're still keeping all of our school relationships alive so that as soon as COVID lifts in a more significant way, all of our schools are like, we cannot wait to have you back on campus. We'll be back on campus mentoring kids. But of course, we won't know when that's going to happen, and probably until right when it happens,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know. So
Yeah. Every week's a little different, and we just kind of don't know what's coming
yeah,
down the pike here. So
yeah,
it's a real walk of faith for nonprofits right now. Definitely.
yeah, it is. And I think that I've been really humbled the last couple of years, and that I know what my strengths are. Um, I know that I have the ability to serve people, and I know that I have the ability to be a good problem solver. I love getting to sit with people and their problems, the consultant part of Aaron, that let's just throw me in, let's figure this out. And I've been able to do a lot of that since I've stepped out. I kind of opened up my heart to like, okay, Lord, like, is this consulting? Because I didn't know what was next totally. And
Yeah.
so within a short amount of time, I had signed a contract with a senator for a year. After leaving, it was like the moment that I set the intention of I'm going to hand off Catalyst. Within 3 weeks, I had booked consulting jobs with people and places that were kind of like, in my mind, I was dreaming too small, I guess, because in my mind, I'm like, maybe if I work really hard in 3 years, I could work with that person, or maybe if I grow with these little things, maybe then I could get to this. And instead of that, I started up here somewhere, like I went straight from nonprofit guy to consulting with a senator and an assemblywoman. It was like, it just, the leap, and how quickly it happened. It was like only God could have done that. And mind you, I wasn't looking for that. I wasn't looking for them. It just came together within a really short amount of time. And so I'd signed a big contract with a guy that was building a school. And he wasn't an educator, but he had the dream to build a school. And then with the people in politics and with all these schools that were now in crisis and needed support. And so I had signed all these contracts I didn't expect, and it felt like the Lord. It was just a wild moment in my life, which kind of brings me up to current day. Is I'm helping build a school now, and it's called the California Adventure Academy, and it's been an incredible. There's a whole story there in and of itself, but God's been moving me kind of every single moment in extended moments of faith. It's been for Him to teach me something, or to show me something, or to reveal to me where my dependence was. Oh, you're trusting in yourself more than me here. I want you to learn how to trust in me. If I can take you to, if you want to go up here, wherever you want to go, you've got to learn how to be connected to me in a different way than you were before. And even working in the church, it was like, I loved it. I loved getting to work with kids. I loved getting to feel that connection. But I'd gotten to a place where I had done that long enough that I could do it without thinking. I could come in and preach and teach a lesson and do leadership development in the church segment. And I was like a duck in water, but it wasn't challenging anymore. So building this nonprofit, I had never built a nonprofit before. And so it was providing all of this opportunity, this like rich soil for me to be challenged and for me to have to grow and for me to feel the need um, for God on a different level. And it's like that deepens your affection and your relationship when you go, I need you to show up for me. And then he does show up,
Yeah.
and you can go and you look back and you go, I needed God to show up and he did. And I'm building this like a relationship of like, oh, I really can trust you. And I thought I could trust you before, but the stakes were low. My being able to take care of my family wasn't on the line. Well, that's been on the line multiple times now, and he keeps
Yeah.
showing up. And
You,
so,
yeah, you've got, no, I should check with you because things are constantly changing with you, but you've got 4 kids or do you have more?
we have 5 kids.
You have 5 now. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I've got my 3 little boys, Wyatt, Noah, Toby. So it's 9, 13, 14. And then
Okay.
we have our daughter Jessie, and she's
Right.
15 and a half, going on President of the United States. And then we've got our oldest son, Jared, and he's 27 now. And they're all at home at the moment. Jared's moving out. He moved back in at the beginning of COVID for a while, and now he's moving back out.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Your home is just such a living, breathing testament to how you walk with God, I think. You start out with your 3 little boys, then you welcomed in Jared and Jesse, and that's been wonderful to watch too. You know,
Yeah.
as you're telling me this story, I'm just really seeing how the testing and the transition that you have gone through really has been just the launching pad for where you are right now. And like you say, it was all preparation, but you
Yeah.
just at that point couldn't see that. So at this juncture that you're in, if you could call it that, because it's
Yeah.
ever changing right
Right.
now, which it does with coaching and consulting, because I've done that. And, one minute you're on one path, and then, all it takes is another opportunity, a different client, and, you're on a new adventure. So as we look at faith and culture, and your faith is obviously really important to you. As you're going into this development now of coaching and consulting and launching this school, helping your friend Ryan launch this school, what do you see God doing with you in the culture?
Yeah. Um, well, first of all, I'm gonna land on the school for just a moment. That started off as a consulting contract, and that has turned into a business partnership. And so, I have a background in education. I have a background with kids, and I have a background in developing and shaping leaders and developing the culture of an organization, because I did that a lot with schools. I did that in the church. And so, in this context of building a radical kind of new iteration of school, that's what started off as a consulting job has turned into a business partnership, because Ryan, who's an incredible guy, had a vision to kind of reshape the educational experience for his kids. His kids are very young, and he was looking out and said, this does not look the way I want it to look. This is not the experience I want my kids to have. And so a lot of the initial shaping of culture that I think that we're in right now is that we've been, as a nation, I think we've been given an opportunity, because of the pain of COVID, because of the pain of our lives being turned upside down, to really look at things on a lot of levels and say, is this what I want? Now, a lot of people know that there's things that are happening and it's not what they want. And so they're getting upset and they're yelling about it, but they're also not offering a solution. And so the beauty of the school is that Ryan, for his journey, was like, this is not what I want. But what I love about Ryan is he said, I'm going to create a solution then. He's a solutions oriented guy. And so did he know how to do it? No. Had he ever built a school before? No. Had he ever been a teacher before? No. The closest thing he'd got to a teacher was that he had coached a surf camp where he grew up in San Diego. So he didn't know any of that. But what he knew was that he was supposed to offer a solution for families like him. And so he started building the team. And so when I was working with him, of course, that became a place where we were able to collaborate. And so the merging of faith and culture to me is that it's not enough just to be angry and upset and ringing the bell without doing the internal heart work to say, what is a solution? What would you use me to do to provide an alternative to this broken piece?
I love that perspective. I
Yeah,
love
not that we can fix everything,
hmm
but my I had an old teacher when I was first teaching, and I was the one constantly saying, well, this is wrong and that was wrong. And he pulled me aside one day and he said, Aaron, you need to be careful about doing that. And he says, because if you keep doing that, you're going to have to start volunteering to make those things happen. And I remember laughing at him, and then I was like, oh man, that is really true. If you keep complaining about whatever it is that you're not happy with, but you don't offer a solution, you're going to become someone that people don't like. You're going to find yourself in a lot of needless fighting, or it's going to finally bug you enough that God's going to say, you know, it bothers you because you're supposed to do something about it. And so how the school system was working has bothered me enough that I was like, I'm willing to do something about it. And I'm willing to create a new iteration of school that represents the values that I care about and the
good.
values that I think kids should have. And so Ryan and I are on this wild adventure of launching this school where we're saying if we're going to shape culture, we can't just do it shouting from Facebook. We've got to actually take an action. And so we started with 20 kids, then we had 30. I came on as a business partner in January, and then we doubled in size. And now we have 130 enrolled for next year, and we're launching our high school as well next year. So it's just been this kind of wild ride of um, of growth and faith and risk. And by the way, I still haven't been paid. I'm like, again, I'm out on a limb for something I believe in. And I think when it comes to faith and culture, we love the words faith and we love the idea of shaping culture, but most of us won't sacrifice to actually do what it takes to shift culture. Most of us would never put our safety and security on the line for something we believe in. And that's the part of faith that we don't like to talk about a lot, is that faith is risky.
Yep.
And
Outside the comfort zone.
and it really is. And so like this all sounds good and you may think, well, Aaron's got it all together. And hey, I don't. I have not had a paycheck in 6 months. And you know what? I'm finding the Lord in this. He keeps providing. He keeps showing up. I'm out on a limb on faith again, but because I was here once before at this level, um, I'm looking now with excitement to go, God, where are you going to show up? Because I am not sitting around on my hands. I'm not sitting around complaining. I'm actually showing up and I'm building something that I think you've put in our hearts. And I'm building it with my whole heart. And what I'm believing is that as I continue to build and as I'm faithful, full of faith, um, I'm building something that others can't see. And I only have the next light unto my path. As I'm building this, I'm believing that at some point I'm going to come to a place where I'm going to have crossed a bridge and provision is going to line up with vision. And so I feel like the journey over the last couple of years has been, I've been God's growing my capacity to go farther on faith than ever before for something I believe in.
Right. Farther out on the limb.
Yeah, for the right reasons though.
Yes.
Not
Yes.
not out of foolishness, not out of selfish gain, not out of look at me, like and build Aaron's ego, but for the right reasons.
I'm going to make sure that I put the information about the school, California Adventure Academy, in the show notes so people can check out the website and see more about it. It's from what I understand, it's like a partnership with um, homeschooling families and kind of an outdoor setting, right? An outdoor education.
Yeah, so we're basically we are an adventure programming school. We're actually a homeschool collaborative with an amazing learning center. So we have 10 adventure buckets. We take kids, they're doing equestrian, they're doing archery, they're doing paddling, they're doing bushcrafting, which is like outdoor survival. They're doing what are all the things that we've done? So many different sustainability gardening. They're basically what we are is like we're like a STEM academy. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. And so the kids are getting to go out and 3 days a week. So where a normal school, you might go on a field trip 3 times a year, we're going on field trips 3 times a week. And we are out being active and physical and experiential learning. And then 2 days a week, we're heavy into the learning center. And that's where we have our teachers and tutors that work with the kids. And what we're finding is, even though we spend less time in a traditional classroom, because we marry our adventures with math and science and technology, and because that's all adventure oriented, by the time we get into the classroom, we're getting so much more actual teachable time because the kids are being taught at the level and at the pace that kids should be taught. I mean, in Europe, the kids don't go to school for 6 or 7 hours a day like we do in the United States. They go to school for about 4 hours a day, and they don't have homework, and they score higher on the tests than the Americans. And so part of it is culture. Part of it is also that they allow the kids to be kids. And it's like, don't hear me saying that kids are dogs, but with a dog, they say you've got like about 8 to 15 minutes of training time with a dog per day before you've maxed out their brain and nothing else is going in. And so it's kind of like that with kids, like there's a limit to how much you can smush into a day. And so what we've done is we've maximized physical activity, amazing outdoor experiences with learning, so that by the time we get into the learning center, our kids are just eating it up. And the coolest part about this is that because of COVID, we've got a lot of families that have come over because their sons or their daughters were depressed and shutting down and hating school. And so we have kids that are smiling and happy, and kids that are literally begging their parents to come back from spring break. Like, forget spring break. How do we go back to school?
I
And
love
so
it. That's
it's
great.
it's
That's
been
great.
incredible. We've got 77 kids right now in the school, and we've got 130 signed up for next year. And we've completely re-envisioned the high school experience. And so we're going to be launching our high school next year. And that's a very exciting thing as well.
Aaron, thank you so much for sharing this journey with us, because I know there are going to be people that are watching that are in a similar situation. Waiting for paychecks is a pretty common thing right now. And people are looking for encouragement as they do follow God, because the faith journey is one big adventure, as you've shared. And so I appreciate you sharing your story and telling us about the school. And again, I'll put that information in the show notes so that people can check it out here in Shasta County. And who knows, maybe we'll got people that move to Shasta County so they can put their kids in this school.
Yeah, it's happening.
That'd be great. Is it? Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much for coming by for our conversation today. And we'll check back in with you again. I'd love to have you on the show again talking about some other topic. So blessings on your faith and culture journey.
Thank you. Thank you, Cheryl. It's been wonderful being here. And thank you all of you for checking this out and watching. This has been awesome.